Hey guys, it's Elizabeth with a little PSA. We have the unbelievable conversation with Margo Aaron. She's one of the most inspiring people I've spoken to in a long time, as you'll soon see on the show. I did want to make one programming note, though. Try as I may with sound magic. I wasn't able to completely reduce all the sound of some banging Margo had in the middle of our recording, a little bit of construction going on next door to her house. So when you hear that, please forgive it. What she has to say is so awesome. We went back and recorded later when there was no noise, so you'll hear that too. But this conversation is invaluable. Take a listen. You will fall in love with Margo. She is fantastic.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I am Dara, your consummate co-host, and we have Elizabeth. Say what's up.
Hey.
So we are kind of in a role reversal. Normally I let Elizabeth take the lead because she is the seasoned pro Wine for Normal People with this super trendy podcast in the top 10, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm taking the lead today because we have our one and only guest on this limited series, Margo Aaron. Margo, hey.
Oh, I feel so special.
You are special, and not just because you're a millennial and you were grown up to be told that you are.
But born this way.
We wanted to, yeah, very Lady Gaga of you. We wanted to have Margo on. Margo is someone whom I met in one of my college, I believe, religious studies classes. Is that right, Margo?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, like let's go way back. I remember there was this adorable ginger who entered the class. She was the grade below me. I was rush chair. So I was like, ooh, who's that girl? I want to be friends with her and get her into my sorority. But we quickly became friends. And over the years, I have come to be a huge fan and advocate of Margo and her work because Margo comes at the world from a really interesting vantage point where if I were to describe her, which I am about to, so here we go, I would say that Margo takes a really cool background and intersection of psychology, business, humor, writing, and just all things, not even productivity, but just how do you be a better human and a better person in business and do it sincerely, but from those perspectives. And so Elizabeth and I were sort of butting our heads against the wall about what we and others have gotten wrong and do still get wrong about sales. So here we all come together to talk about what we are doing wrong and how we can do it better. So Margo, since I probably gave you the weirdest introduction you've ever gotten, why don't you tell us how you would define what it is you're up to in the world in this regard?
No, that was the greatest introduction. I think those are the more important things people should know about me. But so I run a platform called That Seems Important, where I teach creative entrepreneurs how to beat resistance and punch their lizard brain in the face. And part of that conversation is skill building around things that we are not taught properly in school, which are sales, self-promotion, marketing. Those, especially as someone who was I was a literature major. I have a graduate degree in psychology. I worked in academia for a long time. So like these were bad words. These were like not things that you kind of feel like you're above it when you come from other disciplines, that like business is not for people who are, smart or have ethics or, we have all of these narratives around sales. And I learned early in my career that sales and marketing were actually extremely powerful tools that when used correctly and ethically could change the world. And so it became sort of my mission to get people comfortable with these things by talking about it a little bit differently than how it is explained in traditional business textbooks, for example. Because in my head, I don't know if this was true for you guys, but like I always pictured that Glenn Ross, like used car salesman in my head when I thought about sales.
I actually feel like there is old sales and new sales, and we are, even though I am Gen X, I feel like we are all sort of stuck in that old sales, new sales paradigm where even the millennial generation, I think, still has that in your heads, don't you? I mean, of that sleazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's going to be like this going forward, but right now that sleaze factor is very strong.
When I started my career, I was in sales and I was embarrassed to tell people I was a salesperson for that exact reason.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because people think that it's pushy and it's annoying. And I actually don't think the sleaze factor is going to go away for a while because the reality of when you have to stand in front of someone and persuade them especially if it's for something that you care about, it feels really, really freaking uncomfortable. Like that doesn't go away. And there's a few mindset shifts that we can talk about today that can dissipate that feeling, and that can take you away from feeling like you're pushing something onto someone. But I think more and more, it doesn't matter how many times you do it. Like when you care about something and you put it out into the world, it's going to feel uncomfortable. And that's a little bit what we're encountering every time you encounter sales and self-promotion.
Margo, that is not making me feel better, because really the thing is that Dara has, even though she's saying that she has not mastered it, is a very good salesperson, because she uses her power of connectivity and you just want to buy things from her and be with her. And I don't have that. So my business could be so much better, but I am terrified. I can't sell. I have been doing this for 8 years. I've had to have people offer me jobs because I can't go out and get it. I could be so much more financially. I'm only now like 8 years into this. I guess like maybe even 10 years.
Wait, so what's stopping you?
No. The no factor. Well, there's two things. One is I keep feeling like, you know what? I have to be more organized. I feel like this is a big woman in business thing. I'm not ready. Yeah. I don't have the right materials. I need to really get something like very polished and slick out there. And now I actually have that in the works. Designers designing something for me. But I know that there are people who would be interested in what I do, but and actually could really use me, meeting planners and people like that, as a trick up their sleeves. But I'm terrified. I am just terrified of the no.
So Margo, maybe this is a good time to get into the mindset shifts that you alluded to.
Yes. And this was one of those things where I do think exposure therapy is so helpful, and starting to recognize like the no's, like you have to actively pursue the no's on your way to the yes. That's what's so great. Well, let's go back to defining sales a little bit, because the question I get asked the most is, how do you make someone buy something? How do you, I have this thing, it's awesome. And so now I am going to shower the world with what I have, and people are going to want to buy it. And this is the wrong way to think about sales.
It's also really not true.
It's not true at all. It's not true at all. It's about, the hard work is actually before you ever get to the sales conversation. So it's sales starts with matching the solution you have to the problem it solves for someone. So thinking about it in that context, you actually aren't pushing anything on anyone. Like your job as a salesperson, or as the founder of your business, or a writer or an artist, or like whatever it is that you do, is to identify the pain point that your product solves for someone, and then tell them about it. Like you are an advocate more than anything. You're not pushing, you're advocating. And when you shift it a little bit that way, it changes the conversation. We're not anymore trying to push or force or persuade or influence someone. We're simply letting them know that this solution to their problem exists. And usually by then they will self-identify. But you still need to be able to make a case for yourself. And you mentioned the problems for women in business. I think one of the places we get tripped up is that we feel like we're being braggy, when really we need to simply describe the features and benefits of our products and like proudly talk about them because they are true, instead of hiding how great we are because we feel like we need to be humble. I think that often really trips people up, is not knowing the difference between those.
Don't you feel like the handout is, like, for me, having something on paper that's professionally designed is going to make it so much easier for me, because then I don't have to brag and be like, here's my paper.
I mean, I think having things like that to make you feel comfortable is great, but people won't read it. That's the thing. Like people are lazy. Like we're all really, really lazy. We don't want to do any work. So part of your job as a marketer and a salesperson is to do the work for them. So like if you are okay, let's use what you have. Right now, I am a millennial who feels very intimidated by wine. I love wine. And had I known that your platform existed, do you know what that would have done for my life? Do you know how many social circles I would have felt accepted in? Do you know how many times I would have been able to like Google under the table while I was at a dinner party and, okay, here's what I'm going to say. Or like, here's what that actually means. And like, there are so many times that you could have made a difference in my life, but because you didn't advocate for it and I never heard of you before, I didn't get that privilege.
First of all, Elizabeth, I hope you were taking notes because there was some gold in there that you should be using in your marketing copy, because exactly to Margot's point, she's telling you what problems you're solving, and that's exactly how you're going to be able to advocate for what you offer.
Don't worry, we're recording this. I'll go back and get a transcript. Yes, it definitely is true. And one of the funny things for me is that I've grown my community 100% organically. So the selling that I'm talking about is for public speaking, which is a way for me to make money. But the building of the community, I have never advertised or marketed. So it is interesting that you're saying that, because I have never put it out there. And it's amazing that as many people listen as they do, because it's just word of mouth. I haven't proactively tried to solve any problem for anybody in a listener context.
Oh,
well, it's
interesting. You have.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have, and you've made those people a little sales advocate for you.
I guess what I'm saying is I have never gone out just by...
You haven't viewed it that way.
Well, by the virtue of the fact that I put out a product that I feel proud about, like that I was doing something that I felt incredibly passionate about, because I had been in this industry and I had been in Margo's shoes 1 million times and felt terrible about myself because wine is so exclusive and such a crap place to be with many people, that I decided to just make something that was not that. Yes, it is true that word of mouth and my advocates and my wonderful, wonderful listeners and fans and cheerleaders have helped. However, I don't usually ask people to do that. They do it out of the kindness of their own hearts and because they stand by the product. So in some ways, it's a little bit of a different situation. I didn't actively sell it. It just sort of became a product or a thing that people really liked. The thing that I need to do, which is I really need to do, is to try to get business. I love public speaking. I may say so myself, I'm pretty good at it. And I have never pitched business. I only wait for listeners who have corporate events to come to me. That's the real problem.
Okay.
Yeah, Margo, take it.
So what you're describing that you did with your business is you built what's called a purple cow. And if you guys listeners aren't familiar with Seth Godin's book, Purple Cow, you absolutely should read it, because his entire premise on what the marketing landscape is today is that you don't ever have to do anything but what Elizabeth is talking about. It's like build something so great that people remark on it and then they tell their friends. And that's actually the only strategy that ever works. Boo. And so Elizabeth, you have been exactly. You have been ahead of the curve and actually doing this the whole time. What's interesting to me is that it didn't feel like sales and marketing to you. And this context of talking about yourself or positioning yourself as a speaker is hitting home. And this is what all of my listeners and like readers and platform we talk about here, is when it starts to feel personal. For whatever reason, when we talk about our business, it has like a healthy separation from us personally. But as soon as it becomes something about us, it feels really icky. And so my question to you is, why did you feel proud of when the way you talked about your business was like you built something you were proud of and you told people about it? Why doesn't it feel the same way about your speaking?
I guess it is more of a one-on-one interaction. And also the product, like I don't ask anybody to pay for the podcast, right? The podcast is free and it's something that you can take or leave. Now, of course, that doesn't stop, as Dara and I have talked about, the haters from dropping like a free, like it's a free comment, and a free podcast, and they'll still comment something nasty. But simultaneously, most of the people that listen to the podcast love it. They are really excited by it, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful because I wanted to be a different voice in the industry, and I put it out there, and it worked. With the speaking, I'm asking people to pay money for that. And I'm asking people to take a chance that really put the event in my hands, because I do a lot more than just speak, because wine is involved. So I have to pick out the wine and I have to deal with the caterers and I have to do a lot of stuff. And they're really, really entrusting me with a lot. Now, I know that it's going to be great, but somebody who's never heard of me doesn't know that. And it feels it feels like a huge mountain to climb, to have to convince somebody that I am someone that they should entrust with that.
So what do they care about? the people you have to convince?
Well, they care about budget and they care about getting a good event.
Okay. Can you give them those things?
On two, but not always on one.
Okay. So where do we find the people where we could do both?
You've got to, again, you're right. You have to find the match. So I'm working on that now, and you have to fish where the fish are.
Yes, that's exactly it. And the budget thing never goes away, but if we can find a place where we can connect, what you're doing is creating an experience for them that guarantees that they look good in front of their boss and their constituents. And if you can hang on to that piece, that's the part you sell. Because if you start feeling like it's personal, like, oh my God, are they going to feel like it's worth the money? Am I doing it right? Are they going to be pleased with me? You're going to lead yourself down that rabbit hole of self-loathing that like takes us all down.
Well, you know what the other thing is? I will tell you a very interesting story. And then Dara, we can all talk about our war stories, and Margo can tell us how we can fix all of these problems that we've had in the past. But today I have a new client. I did a speaking event in New York, and it's generated a lot of buzz and good business, or good inquiries, I should say, not business yet. One of the people that it attracted was a meeting planner in New York, and I really want to work with her. So I had pitched her on an idea, and then she came back and said, well, the client was thinking about doing something like this. Well, I have been doing this long enough to know that what the client is thinking is something that everybody always thinks is a great idea, and it never, ever works. So I wrote her back and said, although I'd love to work with you, I know that something like this, this style of event that they're talking about is not going to work. It's going to fail. They're going to be unhappy that they spent the money, and it's not going to work. So I also do a lot of that too. I guess I consider myself to be a consultant too. If it's not an event that's going to work for me, I've had people be like, can you come do a party at my house where everybody drinks like a bottle and a half of wine each? No, I cannot do that.
I think that's an important part, Elizabeth.
Right?
You
right.
have
So
to
that's
be
another
able
part
to,
of sales, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like with my credit card processing company, which is my first business, I constantly would tell people, listen, you've got great rates. You shouldn't go anywhere, or we're not the solution for you, and this is a better solution. I think that's important because your reputation will always be with you. People will remember that. They'll still refer you elsewhere. And honestly, if you can't deliver on it, why did you do it in the first place? Not because you can't do it, but because it wasn't a fit in the first place. So you've saved yourself and them a lot of headache and kept your integrity intact.
So that, I think, is an important part of sales, right?
Absolutely.
So
totally.
So part of the keys to selling well are things like know if you can actually deliver.
Yes.
Which is partially why, sorry, Margo, because I want you to come in with like the real hammer at the end here. But I think that's part of why sales has such a bad reputation, that people are so accustomed to people saying, yeah, I can do that, and over-promising and under-delivering. Correct. When the three of us are the type of people who are going to go in and we're going to under-promise and over-deliver. But sometimes we're going to lose the deal because when we under-promise and we don't sell ourselves as much as we really can, or we say no to things that we know really are not aligned, it doesn't always feel great in the short term. But I'm a big believer that it still works out in the long term. Margo, I feel like you've got some really good stuff to say about this.
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, learning, part of the process and why I think people need to go out and actually sell, and that's how you get better at these things, and like desensitize to the process and realize it's not personal, is that you need to confront like what the market is asking for and understand the difference between, sometimes people don't know what they need. So you have to be able to navigate those conversations where you have to, like, they need what you have, but you have to frame it in a way that they want. And then there's times where it's just sincerely not a good fit. And you have to be confident in your own services enough to be able to encounter those situations and like know what you're selling. Because that's the other thing. Sometimes people don't know what they're selling, or they're shifting it and changing it and not knowing how to talk about it, or overly eager for that yes, that they change what they're doing and then give something bad. I have been a part of a lot of deals that made me uncomfortable where I wasn't necessarily the lead salesperson on it. And when I found out what was negotiated and I was brought in as a subcontractor, I was really upset because promises were made that marketing can absolutely not deliver. And even though the money was there, we got paid, it felt really terrible. And those are the kind of deals you just never, ever, ever want to put yourself in a situation of that. And that's why you want to get in front of your market, also for your own market research and edification, because people talk about what they want. No one talks about what they need. And when we go into sales conversations, we almost always tell people what they need, and we want to give them what they need. But that's not ever what they buy. We only ever buy what we want. Every single time. And so learning how to think in the way that, like, in this case, maybe it's an event planner. What do they want? Like, you will deliver what they need, but what do they want? How can you frame what you have in terms of what they want, so they feel happy, and then deliver what they need at the end of the day?
I feel like you might need to flesh that out a little bit more in terms of want and need, because the need is you're coming to them with a service, right? And I'm going to take it away from me now and just say in general for sales, you're coming at somebody with the need for service. So in Dara's case, someone needs credit card processing. That's already the need. So then they're going to pick. Are you saying they'll make their final decision on their wants?
Okay. No, I gotcha. So I'll use my consulting practice from like 7 years ago as an example here. I was a marketing strategist. So everyone needs marketing strategy. But when I went to sell it, no one would buy it because what they wanted were sales. They would say, I want more customers. I want more traffic. I want more people to sign up for my email list. They wanted very specific results. So if I went in and I said, okay, we can get you more traffic, and they would buy that. But in the process of that, I would build in the marketing strategy because that was the actual thing that they needed, even though they didn't necessarily want to like value that when we were going through the sales process.
Right. Meaning you're not going to lead with, here, I'm going to give you this marketing strategy. You're instead going to answer to what their wants are.
It's a really challenging question in my mind because I have an MBA in marketing. I was a marketer for a long time also on the brand side and did marketing strategy also. And the one thing that I never promised was sales to my internal teams. I didn't do external marketing strategy, but I never promised that because you ultimately don't know what the customer is going to do. The only thing that you can do is promise what you can deliver, right?
Yes.
You might do a social media campaign,
yes.
Right? You might do a social media campaign and get nobody and no sales. And so it's an interesting paradigm because for me, of course, let's say that I were to hire you, I would want you to sell me. I want to see whatever, but that's the end result that I'm going to be looking for. So it's a risky proposition in a way because
we got to de-escalate it though. Like maybe you were giving a deliverable. You were doing exactly what I was talking about. Like if it doesn't have to be sales that you promise. Like you can't promise something you won't deliver. But what you promised was we will take social media off your hands and we will manage it for you so your team can focus on other stuff. Like that's a great promise.
Right. So I think that that's a really key thing is to figure out what you can deliver for someone, because oftentimes when people make sales pitches to me, I'm like, you can't do that. There's no way you're going to be able to make that happen. To your point about people, It's like this crazy thing. There's a big difference between entrepreneurs who are doing their own sales and then also delivering, which the three of us all have to do. And being an outside salesperson who is selling things and doesn't, if you don't have a real idea of what the value is or what Margo could deliver or Elizabeth can deliver or what Dara can deliver, Yeah. Dara, have you come across that before?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I remember you're reminding me of a really, really dark time in my sales career where I worked with we had an episode on Jennifer, on the Jennifer problem.
Jennifer.
Which actually we should add an addendum to since Jennifer popped back up recently.
Oh, God.
However, Jennifer and I worked together at this high-end home audio video company. And I remember this would happen all the time that I was strictly sales and business development. And I would go out and pitch and promote and book hundreds of thousands of dollar packages for home theater systems and home automation packages and whatever. And I would come back and they would say, I don't actually know that we can do that, but they'd tell me that they could, or they'd come in, like the owner of the company would come into my sales meetings and start pitching them things that I knew that they couldn't deliver. And it was my relationship that they were sullying. So I felt like regardless, if you know or don't know, like it's your responsibility as a salesperson, regardless of if it's you who's delivering the end result or not, to know exactly what's within the capabilities, because at the end of the day, you walk away with the relationships and the reputation. And that is the thing that you need to really hold tightly to, because that's what really is going to matter and come with you from sales job to sales job or business to business that you own or whatever environment.
So do you think that's the worst pitfall that people hit?
Honestly, I think it's different for men and women. I think men overpromise and there's a little bit of hubris. I think the worst pitfall for women is not even trying. They just assume that they're going to be rejected. There's an element of perfectionism and wanting the perfect pitch, and confusing sales with like wanting to be liked and letting that interfere with being objective in the process. I think that's a huge pitfall for people when they get up and they take it really personally, where it feels like it's personal, whereas like the person might not be rejecting you as Dara or Elizabeth. They're just don't need the thing that you have at the time. Or maybe it's a money thing, or maybe they went with so-and-so's son because they had to. Like there's a million reasons why we can be rejected. And I think we buffer ourselves against rejection so much that we fail to actually take the shot.
The other reason I think we don't push ourselves hard enough is it comes off annoying. And it's really hard to know the difference between when you're bragging and showing off versus talking about the features and benefits of a product. So again, like I would encourage people to not personalize this and think specifically of the service that you offer. And also think like it helps if we pause and just think about the person on the other side of this exchange. So where we get stuck is we get really consumed and in our heads about like, what do I look like? How do I appear? How do I sound smart? I know that was always my fear is like, I really, really want to sound smart. And I really, really want this person to know that I am the right person for this. And so I'm going to try too hard. And what that ended up looking like was what I called the overly chipper effect and the won't shut up effect. So there's two things. So the overly chipper effect is when you suddenly get really, really excited about the thing you're talking about. And so this shows up less in person sales and more like online sales. So you'll see it like on social media when someone posts like, oh my God, you guys, I am so proud of blah, 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 blah. And there's lots of exclamation points. Like they're not really that excited. No one talks like that. Like I would never, if I'm happy about something, I don't call Dara up and be like, oh my God, Dara, I'm so excited that I just got this notification about me being accepted into this. I don't talk like that. I'm like, Dara, are you kidding me? I just got called by HubSpot. They're asking me to do this thing. Or I would be like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is so cool. I'm so proud of myself. Like, I don't know. There are things that you would say to a friend that is really different. And so the way we show up in a sales conversation tends to be really contrived and really fake because of the overly chipper effect. We think that we're supposed to sound professional. We think that we're supposed to sound overly humble or grateful while also being secretly boastful. It's better if we just be boastful or just be excited if you're actually excited and talk like a human, because that is what ultimately connects with someone on the other side. So I said the overly chipper effect. The other one is the won't shut up effect. And that is what happens to me, especially, and I think it happens to a lot of people, when we get into selling mode and we think we're supposed to sound or look or act a certain way, and we cannot stop talking. We're overly consumed with how we appear in the conversation instead of how the other person is coming up. What is helpful with that is a strategy I like to call shut up. This, you think I'm kidding and being tongue-in-cheek, but I actually had a colleague of mine. I sat down in a time where I was really having a hard time closing sales, and I was getting great leads, really strong referrals, and I was sitting down for sales conversations in person, and I was closing none of them. And I would leave the conversations always feeling like I was a genius, like, oh my God, this person told me their problem and I solved it. I told them all the things they need to do, and I don't understand why they didn't call me back or why they're not following up or what's going on. And my colleague was like, Margo, because you steamroll over them, you don't let them talk, you don't make them feel heard. It's like the Margo show where you're just talking about yourself the whole time and why you're so great, and then you give them the actual solution to their problem. So like, why would they hire you? And that's when I realized there is a little bit of strategy here. And so one of the strategies that I call shut up and listen is pausing and recognizing that a sales conversation is actually not about you and what you can do for someone else.
It's really interesting for a lot of reasons, but one thing that it makes me think about is the follow-up too, because I think oftentimes when someone finally throws themselves into the arena, which I know is a keyword for you, Margo, you love that one, that often we just do it one time, like we make the one call, we send the one email, we have the one meeting, but really then the follow-up becomes so critical. And I know there's a lot of marketing data around the 7 points of interaction or impression that it takes for someone on average to make a buying decision. But I'm really curious from your perspective, Margo, what are we getting wrong with the follow-up? What could we be doing better?
Oh, that's a great question, Dara, because I feel like that's always kind of awkward. Like, how soon do you do it? How aggressively do you do it? It's a very good question.
Yeah, this is where I actually think Dara's skills of connection are the best. in the world, because this is where you have to judge the person as a human being, and you have to play everyone a little bit differently. But the takeaway, if you take nothing else, is like, just keep showing up. Keep showing up no matter what. A no in this case can turn into a maybe, or just keep understanding that person's need and not pushing at them. So like, the frequency and cadence with which you show up is different in each circumstance. Like, there are some people where I will follow up with them weekly. There are some people where I'll ghost for 2 months and show back up. You get a feel for the person and what they need or where they are based on your original conversation with them. I know there's actual data on how to do this systematically, but I have found, especially for solopreneurs and people who are doing like their own business sales, that like, that is a little unsustainable, that you need to find, if you're working through your own Rolodex of people, that like, connect with them as people. Like, it doesn't always have to be a sales conversation with the follow-up. It could be like, hey, you mentioned your daughter really loves Egypt, and like, I was at this Egypt and I thought of you, like, how are things going with the business? That's it. You just show up on their radar.
I'm so glad that you shared what you did, Margo, because it's really been something that has helped me in my sales processes over the last 10 plus years. And it really comes down to what it is that you're talking about, which is that we are all humans. And it's sort of this golden rule of do unto others when it comes to sales, that I don't want someone hammering my inbox every week on the same day or every month cyclically. And I can tell that I'm just this number in their system, when instead it's dual-sided. It's do as you want done unto you, but also do as you think they want done unto them. And you have to take the cues, like Margo's saying. And for me, it's always been that way, where I have people in my calendar and I rotate them and move them around. And there will be plenty of days that someone will pop up for a follow-up, and it's been a week or a month or whatever the cycle has said, because often people will tell you. Often you can just ask and say, hey, Mary, I know this isn't a good time, or you said XYZ, that it's not great right now. When would be a better time? And then they invite you back into their inbox or their voicemail or their phone call. And so that's always a great cue, because what I'll do in those cases is reach back out and say, on the same chain, and say, hey, just circling back, you'd mentioned this would be a better time. Let me know if you're ready to hop on a call or whatever that is. And also, I like to integrate a mix of phone call and email. I think it's really easy to ignore email. It's a lot less easy to ignore someone by voice.
I was just going to ask you that, Dara, because I think it's also a regional thing. So, yeah. I moved to North Carolina from Georgia, and I feel like everyone here wants you to call them. The sales here happen by phone. If you want to engage somebody, email is not a great way to do it here. You have to call them. And
totally.
So I think you also have to know your market. And I feel like maybe in the Northeast, like I know in Boston, calling was really more discouraged.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you have to know your audience in general, because again, we talk about a lot with generations here. Like you say, you're Gen X, I'm millennial. And while I don't ascribe to every part of it, I definitely love inbox more than I like phone call, because phone call feels like an intrusion for me when I'm often heads down in a flow of some sort of work. And I will diligently answer all of my emails, but most people won't. So you really, again, like you said, need to pay attention to your market, what they're into, like all of those things to know what's going to work best. And I think the other piece of it is that until someone tells you no, in my opinion, that means that you continue to follow up, but there is this fine line between persistence and annoyance. And I am constantly trying to really be on the edge of that. And one of the things that I say specifically when I'm emailing, and it gets to a point where I think, you know what, it could be veering there and I haven't heard from them and I don't know, is to say, hey, it's not my intention to be a nuisance, or I don't intend to be a pest. However, you'd asked me to follow up, or I never heard back from you on this. And 9 times out of 10, that will incite a response where the person on the other side will say something to me like, I'm so grateful that you've been so persistent, and I'm so sorry I've not followed up. And then suddenly they're in this position where they're apologizing to me, even though I'm in the position of trying to sell them something. And that obviously isn't what I'm designing, but I want them to understand what my intention is, because that doesn't always come across over email. And they might just think, gosh, this girl's so annoying.
I think that's true. Sometimes hearing someone's voice makes a big difference.
For sure.
But I will say that the first time I made sales calls, I did take a few shots.
Tell me more.
I did. I took a shot of vodka because I just couldn't do it. I'm telling you, like, this is all so out of my realm. It's so funny because I will tell you one other really funny thing. When I was little, I was like the salesperson extraordinaire. I was like jump rope for heart, selling cookies for the school. Yeah. I wanted to go around and just sell door to door, and I was really good at it, and I just wanted to keep going. And it did feel really bad when I got the no, but I wanted to do that. And now look how far I've fallen.
That's so interesting. I had this experience growing up where I'm a twin and he hated selling and I was really into it. And I would take his sales sheet for the school fundraiser and rotate them door to door and sell his, sell mine, sell his, sell mine. And I loved it. And at the time, I didn't even think of it as sales, but I think that goes back to what you were saying, Margo, about how it's so mental and it's so much about when it becomes personalized, especially for businesses like the three of us have, that when we feel like they're rejecting us because it's us, it's our service, it's our business, we're the true representation of that, it can be a lot harder to get over that hurdle. But like anything, momentum creates resistance to that fear. And you just kind of stop thinking about it in the same way when you realize, hey, there's enough in the pipeline and I'm moving and working towards this and I'm seeing some success that it's sort of, at least for me, has washed away a lot of those fears or apprehensions.
These are some of the things I think about in how to shift your relationship to sales so it doesn't feel so scary and so it doesn't feel like you're being pushy or annoying or sleazy. I think anytime you run into that, that is the old way of selling. I will caveat this, though, to say that there is a natural discomfort in the beginning. And that is very different from being annoying. Like, there's actually being annoying, and then there is, oh God, I'm so nervous I'm being annoying, but I'm actually doing the right things. And that's because self-promotion and sales are uncomfortable when you first start doing them. And the only way to figure out the difference is to have some level of self-awareness and to practice, because you'll be able to know. So familiarity with what it feels like to sell is really important, and that only comes from experience. Like, I can't prepare you or tell you or give you any benchmarks for what the difference is, other than telling you to have some self-awareness. And self-awareness, unfortunately, comes with a level of self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is not great. Like, we want you to still be loud and getting in front of prospects. But I do think if you're the type of person who is worried that they're being annoying or sleazy or pushy, you are probably not being annoying, sleazy, or pushy.
Honestly, Elizabeth, after kind of that coaching, I got to sit back on and listen between you and Margo. It sounds like just throwing yourself in and starting to take more action on it will begin to demonstrate to you why a lot of the things that you're telling yourself around, hey, I've got to have the perfect sales sheet, or I've got to have the pitch right, or this or that, which are really just perfectionist excuses, to be very blunt about it, that that you have everything you need just from a conversation and from everything historic or even references and testimonials to get you the sale when it's the right person.
Yeah, that's true. That the thing is, even a pipeline of one is enough to keep you going.
Totally.
I think that we have really tackled this very well, the three of us power women here. And Margo, you said it. Dara, you said it too, is just to go out and do it. If you don't go out and do it, nothing is going to happen.
Right, and the fear builds. The longer you stay on the other side of it, the bigger the monster becomes.
And my monster is very big, but I have to go slay it right now. Okay, now I'm going to go sell stuff, okay? So that's it.
Yeah, get on it. Well, Margo, thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom with us. We really appreciate you.
If you would like to keep up, you can find me on thatseemsimportant.com, where I help creative entrepreneurs beat resistance and punch their lizard brain in the face. And all that means is I will help motivate you to get your shit out and desensitize you to sales and self-promotion. And we'll also talk about other fun things around entrepreneurship and marketing. You can also reach out to me on Instagram and Twitter at Margo Aaron. And thank you guys so much for having me.
Elizabeth, thanks for being so candid as always. And audience, thank you for tuning in.
All right, we will see you next time.